Call the meeting to order.
Yeah, no.
This is the Finance Committee of the Holyoke City Council. My name is Joe McGiverin. I am the chair. To my right is Councilor Tallman. To his right, Councilor Bartley, both members of the committee in person. We are pleased for his first time in over a year by Zoom to have a member of the committee, Councilor Sullivan, with us. And our fifth member, I believe, has a commitment, but is going to try and join us later, Councilor Leahy. Also in the chambers is Councilor Murphy. And also on Zoom, I believe that's it. We have some special guests on Zoom. We'll be getting
Todd
to them.
McGee's also on Zoom.
And Councilor McGee is with us on Zoom. This is a Finance Committee meeting being broadcast live on the cable broadcast public access channel, also being streamed, and is also live in person for anyone who wishes to come down. We have item number one.
Motion to take item number one off the
Motion
table.
made and
Discussion.
second to take a settlement agreement between the City of Holyoke and the UFCW Local 1459 Council on Aging employees off the table. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. We have a agreement, MOU, before us that was negotiated by Mayor Murphy with the help of the Law Department. And it is before us with a number of amendments to the contract for the Council on Aging employees. As we start discussion, I just have to note, though, a transfer is going to be needed to honor part of this contract, and that transfer, I believe, is coming in tomorrow evening. So it's not before us this evening. We can still talk about the particulars at the end of discussion, then we can talk about what we wish to do in regards to tomorrow night, if that's okay with the committee.
Yes, it is.
With us, we have representatives from the union.
Jeff Jones.
Jeff Jones from the Law Department.
Anybody? I don't see anybody.
Do we have anybody from the Law Department?
I don't see no one on the line.
Not sure why the Law Department doesn't understand the importance of coming in for these discussions.
Just a point of order, Mr. President. Why don't we, why doesn't the chair maybe consider going to Councilor Mayor Murphy and just give us a synopsis of what's going on, and then we can take it from there.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Be it that we don't have the attorney who negotiated the contract on behalf of Mayor Murphy, we'll go right to Mayor Murphy, and Mayor, if you could just go over the particulars of the contract. And then, Mr. Jones, are you the president of the union?
Yes, I am.
Okay, and then we'll go to you right after Terry. How's that sound?
Well,
Very good, thank you.
Derek?
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I mean, all the agreements that I tried to do, I tried to pretty much do all one-year agreements, and recognizing, obviously, that I was not going to be there for future years, but also try to treat each union as similarly in terms of percentages as I could. And I believe we did the same thing here with the Council on Aging employees as we tried to do throughout. And I worked with Attorney Dupree and the rest of the city law department, but we also, had meetings with the executive director and the union. So, I mean, I think we try to put out a fair deal, recognizing that my capacity was as acting and not trying to create any long-term commitments one way or the other.
Councilor Murphy, can you address the changes to longevity?
I don't have that actually in front of me, Joe, so.
Nope, that's fine. And you did, like all contracts, add Juneteenth. Yep. Can we try? And the increase effective July 1st, the one you just talked about, is the 2% COLA type of increase?
Yep.
Is there any retroactive increase?
I believe it's all starting this fiscal year.
That's the way I read it, but I just wanted to check.
Yeah.
Okay, if
I don't
the
call it any
committee could suspend the rules to allow the president of the union to speak with us.
Motion to suspend the rules and allow the president of UFCW 144059 to speak.
Second.
On that motion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Thank you, Jeff, and welcome. We
Thank you.
gave our former great mayor a chance. Could you just maybe run over any highlights you see of changes in the contract through this MOU?
I think the way it was presented by the former mayor is accurate. It's a one-year deal. It's 2%. Juneteenth was added. There were minor tinkering going on with longevity. There was a little bit of grammar cleanup, but it wasn't anything. There was new language on union membership and agency fee in light of the Janus Supreme Court ruling from 2018, where we needed to update it. So we did so. Then just the duration, we normally sign 3-year contracts in the past, and this was a 1-year deal, which I understand to be pretty much across the board in Holyoke in light of the mayor being an interim mayor and dealing with the pandemic.
I think it captures just about everything. The wellness instructors continuing education units. Can you explain that to us?
That was a relatively new position that was created since the past contract, and there was a provision for training for different members of the bargaining unit. And so what we tried to do was allow for additional training for that wellness person to also be supplemented in line with other existing bargaining unit positions. So we just wanted to be consistent.
And then the Domestic Violence Leave Act, the Small Necessities Leave Act, and the Parental Leave Act. Can you just give us the specifics of that the city would abide by those?
Yeah, that was basically a proposal by the city in bargaining, and that was just to be in line, so it's in print. Those were already being adhered to, and it was just a way to clarify what those acts are and the position of the city and the union. So, Small Necessities Leave Act has been around for a considerable period of time. And the Domestic Violence Leave Act is, it's the same thing. It was just a way to codify what was already existing as a practice.
And we've asked, and I know Councilor Bartley has repeated this every time we do this, for the law department to don't just give us the MOU and the changes, give us what the changes, what was. And the only thing I see that makes a little bit of a difference is you said you tweaked the longevity, but we don't have the old longevity rates in front of us. Do you know what the differences are?
I have the new ones. I don't have the old ones, so I have to apologize for that.
Okay. We will try and get a hold of it. I'm going to open it up to questions, just so you know, and I'm not sure if you heard me, but we typically need to know where the money is coming from in the budget to pay for the increases. A lot of times in recent history, it comes through a transfer, which there is a transfer coming in tomorrow evening. It's less than $2,500. It's on the agenda. We may be able to talk about it tomorrow evening, match it up with this, and be able to solidify the contract. But if not, we'll get the transfer and take care of business within 2 weeks. Do we have the auditor with us?
Not yet.
I don't see her online.
Yes.
Oh, there she is.
Hi, Tanya, welcome.
Hi, thank
Is
you.
any of the increases, is there anything we've missed, and are any of the increases already in the budget?
So the increases for the salaries are not in the budget, and I thought they were budgeted, so I do apologize that transfer went in late. The longevity is fine because many of her long-term employees left. So she does have the increased longevity in her budget.
Thank you. And the 2%, do you know the total increase for the department with the 2% increase? Is it just, is it
It's
the,
1,650 for the salaries. The transfer that we put in was also for, some increases for the PSA, which amounted to $915.
okay, I'm reading a transfer that is more than 1,650. So
So in this transfer, the director put 2 different union contracts on the same transfer. So part of it, $915, was for the PSA contract, and $1,650 was for this UFCW contract. I didn't realize that at first, till I spoke to Neve.
now the PSA contract, we don't have it in front of us.
Yes. No, because it already went through. I thought the salaries were actually budgeted for the Council on Aging.
Okay, so what you're
The
telling us
PSA has gone by.
is on the PSA contract, which we already did vet out, that not all the money was in the budget for this particular department, and they're catching up to it?
Correct.
Okay, thank you, Tanya. I'm gonna open this up for questions. Counselor Bartley.
Yeah, I'm just going to make a motion when we're done. It's my sense that since we have an order for tomorrow night, we should just deal with this in one fell swoop at a subsequent finance meeting, Mr. Chair. So I think we should just, after our questions, we should just table this. But so I'll make that motion at some point after we're done. But that's my take. Just on a couple of the, and I know we're not negotiating provisions here, but I did want to point out in here that this agreement says that the city agrees to notify the union in writing within 30 days of all newly hired employees, their shift and classification, and also dates of termination. So there's going to be an ongoing dialogue with the union about employee matters. Furthermore, this agreement in Section 1 says the city agrees to deduct fees and regular dues. I would just be amazed as to why this is not already in place. I don't know how the union's getting paid as it is, but apparently it hasn't been getting paid or not any kind of a formal way. So when you see Article 4, Section 1, that's slightly confusing to me as to why that language is being inserted now. And the other one, Mr. Chair, is in Article 9, Section C. What would be the rationale for changing the 40-hour week to a 35-hour week once there's a vacancy? I'd be curious as to why that was agreed to and negotiated out. So those would be my questions.
Counselor Tomlin?
I'm all set.
Okay, before Counselor Bartley makes the motion, Jeff, essentially what we've just found out, and thank you for being here this evening because your answers were perfect and got us to where I think we need to be with your contract, with a couple of questions that Counselor Bartley just asked, and a couple of, I think we could get the answers to the questions I asked. But what we now have is money coming in tomorrow night for 2 different contracts. Which I think if you heard what was said, the Professional Supervisors Association is also in need of what they've already negotiated, which would have been ratified if the money was in the budget. So technically, the auditor should not have paid any of those increases out because the contract was not fully ratified because the money was not in the budget. But we need to catch up with that, and I think tomorrow night, we got a busy agenda. We're not going to have the answers to all our questions. So I think Councilor Bartley has made the suggestion, is about to make the motion that we're going to table this and match it up with the transfer at our next meeting and get it out in 2 weeks. I apologize, because I know the holidays are coming, and it's a modest increase, but a well-deserved increase to all the members of your union. But if we can't match it up, and I don't know why there's no one here from the law department, because they certainly are supposed to be here answering questions, and it just seems to be every time we do a contract these days, it's pulling teeth to get someone from the law department. Part of it is some of the attorneys that negotiated are no longer with us, but we still got to find someone to represent the law department. Jeff, do you have any questions or any thoughts about what I just said?
No, this is the third contract, I believe, that we've negotiated for the Council on Aging, and this is the first one of these meetings that I've been at, and I appreciate the invitation, and I understand I understand the procedural delay. I mean, you're very transparent about why. As far as Councilor Bartley's questions, the third one on the transportation employees, that was actually a city proposal, was not our proposal. But they were basically grandfathering the person in that position, and as soon as they no longer had employment with the city, they wanted to downsize that position by 5 hours. So that was the proposal. The other questions, I'm not quite sure. Article 4, I think there was a question about that. A lot of this stuff is just rewording. It's better language than what we already had, so that's why it might appear to suddenly appear now, but it's been there before in another form. And I'll leave it at that.
So point of order, Mr. Chair, why don't we
Councilor Bartley?
get the original contract so we can have something to compare it to.
Yes, I agree.
So,
Make a motion to put the original contract with this amended contract?
yeah, if we can get a communication.
Communication.
Maybe a late filed order or something for tomorrow, just so we can formally funnel it through city council to finance. So who would have access to that, Joe? Would that be the auditor?
Law department?
The law department would have it, and
Okay, so-
also we need them to to be with us at the next meeting, or someone. Even if they didn't negotiate the contract, they could answer questions or get answers for us.
So maybe we should just, do we have to take a vote to communicate to the law department to send us a
No.
contract? No?
Jeff, did you catch all that?
Yes, I did.
Okay. I'm sorry. Our Jeff.
Sorry.
No, my mistake.
The administrative assistant.
I'd be surprised if he missed it. I don't know if we can communicate. Jeff is in the Wizard of Oz closet doing the broadcast for us.
But he takes copious notes.
He
Jeff.
does.
So-
I will follow up on it with Jeff and make sure that the law department or one of us will contact him tomorrow and get it on the agenda. But we can get, this public record. We can get a copy of the full contract. That's not a problem. We need their voice here at the next meeting. Jeff Jones, thank you for your understanding, and we'll do everything we can to get this out in 2 weeks. So the motion on the floor is to table this, to catch it up with the transfers and some answers to questions asked this evening. On the motion to table, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Thank you.
Take 2 off the table?
Motion to take item 2 off the table?
Motion made and seconded to take item 2 off the table, to accept the funds of the Gas and Electric and to enter into an escrow agreement to pay off their 2012 general obligation bonds. On the motion to take off the table, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Representing the Gas and Electric Department, who do we have?
Jim
Mr.
Lavelle.
Chairman, Jim Lavelle's here, and our CFO, Brooke McMahon, is here as well.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you and welcome, Jim. Would you care to give us an explanation of your request? I think it somewhat speaks for itself, but we may have some questions.
Yeah, so essentially what we're doing is taking advantage of current market conditions to refinance outstanding bonds. HG&E has 2 series of bonds outstanding. One is the 2012 general obligation bonds that were issued through the city, where we have about $19,700,000 in outstanding payments. And the second is a series of bonds that was issued through the Mass Clean Energy Cooperative, of which we're a member with MWIC, Mass Municipal Wholesale Electric Company. So what's in front of you, it's basically a refunding of the outstanding bonds. So we've issued new bonds to pay off the old bonds, and the new bonds are at a lower rate. Essentially, in combination between the two series of bonds, we're going to save just under $5 million over the remaining life of the issue. And roughly the old bonds were at about 5% interest rate, and the new bonds are just over 2%. So the monies that are going to come in to pay off the general obligation bonds go to an escrow account where the trustee will disperse those funds to the bondholders as those bonds mature. And Brooke is here in case you have questions that go deeper than that.
Jim, who would the trustee be?
So the trustee is U.S. Bank. So the way that it's set up is that the proceeds from the bond that relate to the general obligation portion were distributed to U.S. Bank, and then U.S. Bank will hold those funds in escrow until and pay on the bonds until they become callable, at which point they'll pay them off in full.
And Brooke, welcome. It's good to
Thank
see you here. I think this is your first meeting.
It is.
Welcome. So if I caught what the superintendent said, you're also going to get the lower rate for the Emblick bond, or does that nothing to do with us? You're combining them?
That's correct. So basically, we had the two issues. We had the GO issue that the city issued on our behalf, and then we had the Mass Clean Energy bond that was issued through that cooperative that we're a part of with MWIC. And basically, all of that debt was just consolidated into one, and both of those previous issues are considered defeased, so they're legally paid off at this point.
And is the 19,700,000 the total that's owed, or is there an additional amount for the Emblick part?
So there's an additional amount for the MWIC part. So the way that it was a $69 million issue by the Mass Clean Energy Co-op. The portion that related to the GO portion is the $20 million piece. There's the additional amount for Mass Clean Energy, which is 36, and then there was an additional $10 million in new money that was taken out for some ongoing construction that we have coming up.
And being that what I'm hearing, Brooke, is that the city will now be responsible for both the total amount of money, no?
No. So what it is it comes off of the debt from the city of Holyoke. And so the debt was initially issued by the city of Holyoke through a GO bond. We, through our Mass Clean Energy Co-op, issued a new bond that will pay that debt off. And so what it's doing is it's defeasing the debt of the city of Holyoke. And so that debt is no longer outstanding, and it's been taken on by our Clean Energy Co-op and is through a new bond issue. So all that we're really doing in this transaction is we're paying off the debt that was issued by the city on our behalf, and we issued new debt in order to do that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So Brooke, is it fair to say the city's got another $20 million of borrowing capacity as a result?
Exactly, right. So it was in the best interest of everyone. It lowered our rate for the organization and for our ratepayers, and it also took that debt off of the city's books. So you have that additional amount to issue if you so chose.
Thank you. I was trying to get to that, but I think I asked it the wrong way. Councilor Bartley.
Well, first of all, I want to thank Brooke, and I want to thank the manager for even supposing that we can ask deep questions about this really complicated business. You give us more credit than we deserve, Jim, but that's why you get the big job. I would say, just a point of order, Mr. Chairman, this is incredibly important, and yet it is deeply convoluted. So I know the chairman has been gracious enough to contact bond counsel and others that can come in and educate, and in many cases re-educate us as to the significance of this. So when we hear there's excess bond capacity, that's great. But on the flip side, what I'm hearing is that this lessens the debt obligation of the city, And I'd like to know what effect that has on the city's, besides increasing bond capacity, what effect does this have, and it sounds like it has a positive effect, and I want to make that clear, on the city's tax obligations, the city's finances, the city's bond rating? I mean, these are just questions that I don't want to throw onto Brooke and to Jimmy, because that's a little bit unfair. And frankly, I'm talking through my hat right now because I'm not even sure what questions I should be asking, but I think this is all very positive. But I would really like us, Joe, at some point after the new year, I mean, at least the three of us are going to be back in some kind of capacity, it looks like, so, for at least 2 more years. So I would really like us to get some kind of a re-education, Mr. Chairman. And the thinking on my part would be to have kind of a 1.5 hour meeting with, this would be the sole topic on the agenda, so we don't have 15 other things which we got to deal with, because this is just so important, and that would lead nicely into the new fiscal 23 budget if we could. So that's, I don't really have any questions for Brooke or Jim at this juncture, unless they want to expand upon what I said. But that's just some thoughts. I think it'd be important for at least the three of us and anybody else who cares to come. And Michael's on the committee meeting too, and Jimmy as well. At least it'd be important for us to try to get our arms around as best we can, being the novices that we are. Thank you.
Councilor Tomlin.
Yeah, thank you, Brooke and Jimmy. And I think this is great news, and I agree with Councilor Bartley to get better informed in this. I think this is important to take care of this. Right now, I mean, it's basically saying that you're getting a better rate, and you're taking this off of the city's debt, which is really improving our bond capacity. And I think that's something that I know there's more involved there. We're going back to 2012, but I mean, the city often does that too. We borrow money, at 4 or 5%, and now all of a sudden it's down to 2.5% or 2%. So just like anybody, if you get a credit card, you're getting 26%, and all of a sudden they say we'll offer you 8% credit on the money that you owe. So I think it's important that we try to take care of this. I agree with Councilor Bartley. We should try to get a better understanding of this. But as I see it, you're basically saying to the city, we're going to borrow this money, pay lesser of a interest rate, and give the city that extra capacity that I'm sure is be beneficial in the situation that we're at. So I really thank you for bringing this forward and looking at this in any ways that we can save the taxpayers and even give the city of Holyoke a little bit of a boost in their capacity of borrowing, which we're looking at possibly building a new middle school, which would be very, very helpful. Thank you.
With us is Tanya, and I just, not to beat the dead horse here, but just for a couple to our auditor. Tanya, the debt obligation, and I know everything that's said here, is good this evening, and doing this for the lower rate is absolutely, a positive for everyone. But with the debt obligation, there's an asterisk. When we do this for the gas and electric, required to, Holyoke Waterworks required to, wastewater treatment plant required to do their bonds, or can do their general bonds, through the city. But there's an asterisk because the ratepayers are paying for that, not the general obligation of the taxpayers, through the general budget. Can you just enlighten us on the difference that it does make it, we are responsible for it, but because of the ratepayers, it makes a difference when our obligation is looked at by bond counsel?
So what I can say about that is the gas and electric actually pay their own debt payments through the city. So it's not going to have any budgetary savings for us, but it will have an impact on, what we can issue for new debt. And I'm not sure if that's the question that you're asking, because it doesn't really have an impact on the taxpayers because it's not within our general fund expenses.
Correct.
But it will be good for us. It will be good for us because, like they said at the gas and electric, it will open up some debt capacity for the city. Is that what you're asking?
I'm asking it, but I've also know Cinder has, been asked questions at the similar meetings in terms of the difference of a utility, city utility. The city takes on the responsibility of the debt obligation, but the utility pays for it, not the budget, obviously. But it also
Correct.
is looked at different when we looked at what is our capacity, or maybe it enhances our capacity because of the revenue source.
So what I can tell you is it will enhance our capacity. So at the moment, this general obligation bond, it still has $22 million of outstanding debt on it. So that's what we will be looking at, for our debt capacity to be able to increase.
Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think it's a wonderful idea, and I'm grateful for the gas and electric. And actually, they brought the refunding to the city. And as bond counsel was looking at it, we actually realized our own selves that we have bonds that we can refund. And you actually took a vote for the refunding at one of the previous meetings. I want to say it was like in September. So that is a part of this.
Okay, thank you. And we have Councilor Sullivan via Zoom with his hand raised.
Okay, thank you. And Brooke or Tanya, if you can help me with this. So to make it clear, what I believe, how I see this is, yes, we'll have excess bonding capacity, all right? That doesn't necessarily mean we can afford to use that excess bonding capacity. What was there before was being paid for by HG&E. So this, while it's good, this will affect their ability to keep rates low on the gas and electric side. Just because we have excess capacity now in the city on our side doesn't mean we can afford to use that capacity. And I think I'm pretty clear on that. If I'm right, I want to get that out for everybody to understand that.
That's
Yeah,
correct.
that is correct, because the gas and electric was paying the debt service on that obligation.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is just because we've got 20 million in excess capacity doesn't mean we can afford to use that excess capacity.
Within the city budget.
Right.
Point well taken. Any further discussion? Councilor Murphy.
Yeah, just Jim or Brooke, so how much longer would these payments take place, and how much are we saving each year?
So the way that it works is that the reason why we did what's called an advance refunding is that the GO portion of this refinancing wasn't actually callable until the end of 2022. And so that's why, as opposed to the money just being issued and being used to pay off the bondholders, that's why we set up this escrow agreement, because the escrow is set up to take the proceeds of the bond to pay the bondholders until the proceeds become callable. And then at that point, in time, they'll pay them off in their entirety. So the net present value savings on the GO bond piece of it, so as Jen mentioned, the net present value savings of the entire transaction is around $5 million. The actual net value savings on the GO bond portion of it, let me just get to that information, so that's about $1.9 million. And so the savings per year, let's see if I can pull that up.
12 million.
I don't have the savings by year. I just have the total amount, which is the 1.8 million. So it's
Do we know how
the
many
1.8
Do we know how many more years the payments will take place?
So the payments will only take place until 2022. And so when we're thinking about the net present value savings, it's taking into account the interest rate on the new money that was issued through maturity, which is through 2031. But this will be paid off in full in September of 2022, because that's at the point that the bonds become callable. So at that point, the escrow is going to go ahead and pay off those in their entirety.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Watch your connections with that other guy you're with, okay? Nothing personal, Jim.
I'm taking.
Any further discussion?
Motion to recommend that we agree to the refinancing of the bonds as said.
I'll second that.
Motion made and second that the Finance Committee make the recommendation tomorrow evening to the full City Council that we are in agreement in the adoption of these general obligation bonds in change for the refinancing structure itself as presented, which I'm not guessing, includes the escrow language in it as written. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor? Any
Aye.
opposed? Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Brooke. We'll do this tomorrow evening before the City Council.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Motion
Motion to take item number 3 off the table for discussion.
Second.
Motion made and second to take item 3 off the table for discussion. This is that the amount of $9,705 be authorized from the Computer Services Department Professional Consulting Services, $20,457 be authorized from the Police Fire Network Administration for an appropriation in this fiscal year 2022 to pay services rendered in fiscal 2021. Off the table for discussion, we have representing the police department, I see John Hart. Anybody else, John?
I'm not, what was that on the agenda? Was that the,
It looks like bills that need to be paid for last year for IT services.
I think that has to do with the city.
Tanya.
Yeah, that belongs to me, Joe. This is Tanya.
It's Tanya.
Our city auditor, Tanya Wojcik. Tanya, could you walk us through this?
Absolutely. So as John Hart said, this invoice does belong to the city. It's from April of 2021, and they sent me this invoice, but I don't pay IT invoices, so I thought that whoever was handling computer services at the time would have put this invoice in for payment. However, it was never paid. Wally reached out to us last month and said they were looking for payment for this invoice, and when we researched, it was never paid. So the money is in the budget in both of these lines, but we just needed the council's permission to pay this previous year's invoice.
So far, I think we understand that. But transfers are two-sided. The money's coming out of this year's budget. One line item is in the police department, right?
No, it's actually in the city IT budget.
I stand corrected. We changed that. It used to be in the police department budget. Okay, so it's in
Correct.
the IT. So the money budgeted this year by Mayor Murphy was to get us, anticipated what was needed to pay this year's IT services. So if we're taking the $20,457 out of one line item and the $9,705 out of another line item, is there going to be enough money in those line items to get us through the year, or are we going to have a deficit before the end of the year?
We are not going to have a deficit, and the money is in the budget, but it's encompassed within all of the IT budget lines. So we're going to have to do a departmental transfer from one of the other lines to cover this cost, but it is in there.
And remind me, what department are we talking about these days? This has bounced around a lot. Was in purchasing, it stood by itself for years. Then the police had part of their IT, they paid it themselves. What is the IT department? Who's in charge of that budget?
I want to say the mayor's office, but I can also say that purchasing has been doing some of the processing of the invoices as well. That would be a question for the mayor. That's where the budget actually was when I first got into the city. So I'm going to say it was normally is managed by the mayor's office.
That's correct. That's what we, Joe, you're right. It was, one time we had a portion of it, when Tom Woods was here, but then, we switched that over, and that is part of the mayor's budget now, the IT.
Mayor Murphy.
Councilor Murphy.
Always the mayor, once you've done it.
So, yeah, this kind of came to my attention in late October, and, you know, the concern came from the purchasing department that we really need to get, she was pretty much handling much of the IT, but, previously, as I understood it, one of the mayor's, administrative assistants, for lack of a better term, was handling it, and then, obviously, we had one person left as well as another person, so I do know that was, and I'm pretty sure that's been brought to Mayor Garcia to look at bringing it back into the mayor's office, but this particular invoice, kind of, everybody thought it was paid until we found out it wasn't paid, and, you know, I think there'll be a better handle once, like I said, it was brought to my attention in, I would say, late October, and I know we were working to try to get it resolved. So this is the attempt to get this resolved now, and then have some specific overseer of the IT budget.
So what I'm hearing is, you know, the invoices are legit. The invoices have been now checked out, that they are services that were rendered, were budgeted for last year, and now we have to catch up to them, and we know we have to make the okay to use this year's funds for last year's bills. Am I missing anything to Tanya, or?
No, I feel like we've encompassed it all.
Okay, and is there any other discussion? Councilor Thomas?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tanya, you stated earlier, I mean, this is coming from the funds that are in the budget, but taking this out from last year's, basically, money, there's going to be a transfer, and do you know where that transfer would be coming from to fill this gap?
I do, actually. Give me 1 second. I just need to get onto this page because I haven't put it together yet. So we are going to take some out of the systems hardware and software maintenance, and also software licenses. In software licenses, we need less licenses on many different programs, so we do have a savings there. In the systems hardware and software maintenance, that's a variable line. It's used to buy certain equipment and supplies, so, I mean, once that's expended, then then we're just not gonna be able to purchase any more of those supplies or hardware. So that's the two lines we'll be taking anything that we need that we don't have available in the computer, consulting, and police and fire network lines.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Any further discussion?
I'll second that.
Motion made and second to recommend approval of paying a prior fiscal year bill invoice with current fiscal year's dollars. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor? Any opposed? So moved. Thank you, and this will go to the city council tomorrow evening.
Motion to take item number 4.
Joe,
The table.
should we take, you want to combine any of these, Joe?
I think so. I think we can do, can we, Tara? I think, oh, this might not be you, I'm sorry. We have, number 4 is by itself. I'm going to do number 4.
Okay, motion to take 4 off the table.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to take item number 4 off the table. This is a request of transfer of $1,500, principal clerk. This is the city clerk going into and register of voters going into the overtime budget. On the motion to take off the table, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Our city clerk contacted me earlier today. She will be at the meeting tomorrow night if we have any questions that can't be answered this evening. But essentially, this is This happened during not the absentee, the early election period. The principal clerk position at points of this year was not filled, so that's why there's a surplus, and the overtime is to offset overtime dollars and costs during the early voting period, which I think we all know took place and understand that. Brennan apologizes for not being here this evening, but that's the explanation in a nutshell. Is there any discussion?
Counselor?
Counselor Tomlin.
Yeah, the early, you're talking about the preliminary, or you're talking about the days before the general election, the 5 days that people are voting? Is that what that was for? Possibly. I know you said the early voting, so I was wondering if it's the days 5 days before the election.
I think it's the general election itself, because I'm sure she had enough money to cover the preliminary election, but she can answer that tomorrow evening if I'm wrong.
Okay, I was just wondering if that was like the 5 days before the general election that we had here in City Hall. I believe people could vote.
Yep.
Those 5 days. Yeah.
Oh, good question. We'll
Yeah.
get that. We'll get that answered.
Okay.
Make a motion and recommend approval of the transfer.
Motion made and second to make recommendation that we approve the transfer. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Motion to take, I guess, 5 off the table.
Motion carries.
We do 5 and, is there a couple of them we can combine there? 5 and 6, 7?
6, and I believe 7 can be done together.
Suspend the rules, take 5, 6, and 7 off the table as a package.
Motion made and second to suspend the rules to take up items 5, 6, and 7 as a package. Each of these are from the Department of Public Works. Item 5 is a transfer of $11,800 from motor equipment repairman to overtime. Item 6 is a transfer of a total of $26,400 from heavy motor equipment operator to refuse other services, the same amount. And item 7 is a transfer of $11,200 from power shovel operator to property maintenance and demo worker, same amount, $11,200. On a motion to take as a package, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And with us from the DPW, I see Amy. Amy, are you here?
She's here.
Yes, I am.
Thank you and welcome once again. Amy, I know this is your at least second meeting with the Finance Committee. Could you just walk us through what these requests are? Number one is, I think we already know, but the surplus in the motor equipment repairman and the power shovel operator, why is there a surplus, and then where it's going and why?
So I'm actually going to request that number 7, item 7, be put on hold for right now.
Okay?
Excuse me, item 5 with the motor equipment repairman, we had a position that became vacant Labor Day weekend, and the other motor equipment repairman has recently left the city as well. So if we look at the dollar amount for each warrant and we factor that in moving forward as if it was filled, we would have roughly, after this transfer, a $28,000 overage. So we have plenty of room for this transfer. The need for the overtime, as Mike had stated, the overtime budget is currently at 69%. Since the date of this letter on November 4th, the used budget has gone up to 84.32%. A lot of our mechanic overtime budget goes to our police department mechanic. He is part of our budget and he works quite a bit of overtime. And we have also been able to temporarily reassign one of our internal employees over to motor equipment repairman. So with somebody in that position, we will need him for overtime moving forward until the position actually gets filled. We have him on several different assignments that he's capable of doing within the department.
Can you elaborate on the police mechanic, why there's a need for overtime?
So from our understanding, there's only one mechanic that works on the vehicles within the police department, and he usually works at least 2 to 3 days a week, 3 to 4 hours of overtime. So from what we're told, it's the high volume of work that needs to be done on the police vehicles.
And who monitors the overtime?
Everything for Eric is signed off signed off on by Gino Villamari.
And Gino's the foreman?
Vehicle. Yeah.
He is a police officer for the city. He oversees the garage.
Okay, but who monitors it for the DPW?
So we just get the overtime forms from Gino, signed off as the supervisor, the immediate supervisor for Eric. And we enter it in. And I would say, I feel comfortable saying 95% of the overtime paid this year has been through the police mechanic.
And if you can, I don't mean to ask all the questions, but can you tell us what the overtime, what you were originally budgeted for and how much you've gone through for this year so far?
Yep, so our original budget was $16,500, and we have $2,587 left.
And will this transfer
And-
get you through the rest of the fiscal year?
Well, I'm hoping. I can't project that, unfortunately, because of the state of the vehicles. I mean, we've already used in the first 5 months of the year almost $14,000. So that would leave us, if we add this 11,800 to the roughly 2,600 left, it's going to come out about the same. So it's really going to depend on the overtime that we're going to have to give to our own DPW mechanic.
And do you have a rough idea how much that usually runs?
We really haven't had much at all this year in overtime for our mechanics, but like I said, one of them left Labor Day weekend and another one just left recently. So I mean, I would like to say our own mechanic would probably, come into at least $1,000 to $2,000 range. It's not a substantial amount, but it's almost like an emergency, put it aside for us.
And this particular overtime account has nothing to do with snow removal and other demands for overtime?
It does not, no. So currently that mechanic will be part of the snow overtime on call, and that does come out of a separate line.
Thank
So
you,
this would
Amy.
be actual overtime.
And before we move on to the next item 6 questions, is there any more questions on overtime?
Pete?
Councilor Tomlin?
Yeah, I just had a question. You stated, Amy, that you're down 2 mechanics recently since Labor Day?
We are, yes. We are down the 2 that we had, and like I said, the union, the mayor, and our board approved a temporary reassignment of an employee that just started this past Monday. So he's been in the position only for a week.
Okay, and then, so you're still basically short another person? Trying to hire
We
somebody?
are, yes. Yep.
Because it just seems like if you don't hire somebody, within the next few months, I mean, you're going to probably need overtime, right, to keep the vehicles maintained?
We will, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Barley?
Yeah, I don't have a question, Mr. Chairman, but I'm a huge believer in having our own employees do the work. And I know I can speak for many counselors that pay attention to this stuff, as opposed to shipping it out to some vendor. I'd rather have our own people do our own work, who know the staff. And at some point, Mr. Chairman, which, I mean, I'm speaking rhetorically because I know you two support this wholeheartedly, but we have to have, and the chairman asked really very good questions as per usual, but we have to have faith in our managers and in our employees to not only monitor the budget, but most importantly, do the job. And I just feel very confident in our mechanic. I happen to know this mechanic. I mean, ironically, as a series of circumstances, I recommended him for the job because he's my neighbor. But that's just coincidence, really. But he's, I'm certain, without having firsthand evidence, I'm certain he's a very conscientious employee. And speaking with the former chief of police, who's now retired, that chief told me directly that the department was very, very happy with that hire. And so that speaks volumes. I know that the acting mayor former acting mayor is here, and I know the former acting mayor has hands on a lot of these things, maybe not to that extent, but certainly, the acting mayor could have weighed in and said, maybe this is not the right way to go. But I think without going much further, I think we've got a situation where it's do or die. We've got to, pay the overtime until we can finally get more employees to come work for the city of Holyoke. So that being said, I support this, and I support the department's work, and I think just to the chairman's point, it probably might be something to consider for the Board of Public Works and the acting superintendent to maybe just make sure, that there's a good line of communication between HPD's officer, what's the name, Joe? Via Mary, and the, but the city auditor's looking at all this stuff too. So it's not like they're eyeballs on all this stuff, and that's the most important things, Joe. So I'm good to go. Thank you.
And thank you, Councilor Bartley, and I agree. And Amy answered my questions to a point where I feel confident that this is the correct thing to do as far as the overtime goes. The history of the mechanics being in the DPW is why I ask some of the questions. These mechanics, police, fire, DPW, were always under the control of their respective departments, and we were encouraged by, at the time, Mayor Sullivan, to enact a mechanics pool for purposes of saving monies and a one-stop mechanic department itself. So that's why I ask, is if that's what we did, then to me, and Amy, I know you're new at this, but to me, it's the DPW who is controlling it, even though the work is for police vehicles, fire trucks, which is a totally different animal and different, sometimes different type of mechanic. But I'm confident, and I have a lot of trust in Officer Via Mary and the police department, and I know we not only save money, but we get better work by doing it in-house. So I agree.
Chairman, I'll make two motions. Well, let me just do one. I'm going to make a motion to table number 7.
I'll second that.
Motion made and seconded that we table item 7. Amy, you just need some more time, or is there something changing?
Actually, so the staff member that is in the property maintenance and demo position will be leaving us for the fire department January 3rd. So it's really, there's enough money in the line right now to pay him through January 3rd. So it's all going to be a matter of when and if we fill that position.
Okay, and you'll let us know at some point where if you don't need the money, we're just going to get rid of the request, or the auditor is going to kill us.
Yes, I will keep you well informed of that.
Okay. So on the motion to table, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And the motion,
Motion to recommend that we adopt items 5 and 6.
motion made and seconded that we adopt the request for transfers on items 5 and 6. Before we vote on this, Councilor Murphy?
Yeah, just a couple of things. First of all, Amy, hopefully after 1 month, everything's going okay, and I thank you for stepping up. So just, I do know when I was in the mayor's office trying to work on motor equipment repair and hiring, that there was a real stress in there. We needed to get someone else in there. And I'm glad they've appointed somebody temporarily, but it is something we need to fill. I know the supervisor, and I am drawing a blank on his name, but I know he actually came to see me. That's how stressed out he was. So that is something we really need to make sure we get at least an additional repairman, if not 2 additional motor equipment repairmen, to make sure that we can, especially as we're getting into winter and the need of potentially having to really work on vehicles. So that's number 1. On number 6, the refuse other services, Amy, is that under the contract for the temporary employees?
It is, yes.
Okay. And without going into all the things that we talked about, if you recall, in terms of making sure we're monitoring things, that's going better than it was prior. I mean,
yes, absolutely.
We're getting good reports on the employees and stuff. Okay. No, thank you very much. And again, I know we need to make sure that we take care of our refuse workers and make sure that we can keep our workers' comp claims as minimally as possible so that we are in a position not to have to hire temporary people. So, thank you, Amy.
Counselor Bartley.
Just one more point through the chair to Amy. And you don't have to answer this right now, Amy, but I mean, I'm just listening to the dialogue with the acting mayor, who is basically was a hands-on full-time manager. I'm hopeful that if I asked you the question, are you having the same kind of dialogue and the open communication with the current full-time mayor? I'm hopeful you're going to say, yes, I am. So and if you can't say that now, then we can just hold our tongues, but is that something that we're driving towards, at least at a minimum, Amy?
Yes, I can tell you we've already had, within his first few days, a personnel staff meeting, to go over where we're at personnel and staff-wise, and I do have another meeting with him tomorrow in regards to snow. So all of the pertinents are being addressed right now.
Oh, great, thanks.
Joe. Counselor Tomlin?
Yeah, just one brief question, Amy. I believe last month in our finance meeting, we also transferred money from heavy motor equipment operator. I don't know if it was about that amount or less, but how does that line item hold up right now? And would you have enough if you hire somebody for the rest of the year to fill that position or positions?
Yeah, so I did the same calculations with this line item. If we kept the same dollar amount through the warrants that we've already had, and we would run right now about $15,000 over after this transfer.
Okay, and how many openings are there right now in that position?
So this line is for trash, the trash collection, and
Right.
we have, I believe, one opening in this division right now. But we've had various openings throughout the first 5 months of the year.
Okay, so even if you did fill that, say in January to June, you'll still have enough to cover the position?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? Counselor Sullivan via Zoom.
Hey, Amy, unfilled positions, though, besides this one here for the heavy motor equipment operator, there's, I think in the highway department, there's also that same position, heavy equipment motor operators.
Yes. Yeah, that is where we have, that's where we've held the majority of the openings, because trash is forefront. So if we are low in the heavy motor equipment operators and trash, we would be pulling highway staff regardless. So right now, the majority is with trash, and highway has a substantially larger opening.
How many vacant positions in highway, though, right now?
I believe highway has five for HMEOs. They have a loader, and we will have the demo position open January 3rd.
Okay, so one in trash, 5 in highway for Cdl drivers.
Mm-hmm.
And who does the snow plowing, the highway?
It's a combination. So we make a first response list, and it kind of goes by seniority, because we do have some guys in the trash department that have not wanted to leave, so they have some time over a couple of the highway guys. So it's a good mix of staff from all over that makes the first response list.
Okay, but right now we've got 6 vacancies for Cdl drivers, correct?
Correct, yes.
Who's gonna do the snow plowing?
I mean, the list is complete, and, our first response list is complete, so we have enough staff members to fill it. Not every vehicle it requires a CDL. We have a couple on some of the smaller routes that are not CDL required. And then we have a number of contracted plowers.
Okay, so we're not in any dire situation going into the winter months with the number of vacancies in Cdl drivers?
Currently, if I had to answer that, I would say we have to rely a little bit heavier on the contractors for the second shift. But we're not at a dire spot, no.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? Motion is to recommend on both these items that the full city council adopt the transfers. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Amy, one more, it's a little bit different.
Motion to take.
Item number 8.
Off the table,
Motion
please.
made second to take item 8 off the table. This is a request for a total of $107,500, heavy motor equipment operator, $89,100, parking control officer, $5,000, and park maintenance man, $13,400. It's being transferred into several accounts, repair and maintenance, City Hall, $5,000, repair and maintenance, City Hall Annex, $5,000, repair and maintenance, Pelsier Building, $10,000, repair and maintenance, Senior Center, $10,000, repair and maintenance, Police, $10,000, repair and maintenance, Fire Station Number 3, $2,500, refuse, other services, $65,000. Motion to take off the table for discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Amy, I want to recognize you. I'd just like to say that in the audience, we have our mayor, Mayor Joshua Garcia. Welcome, Mayor. Certainly welcome to participate, or if you just want to sit there and learn some things from this very experienced committee, you're welcome to do that too. Welcome. Thank you for coming. Amy, could you walk us through this? Might be a little repetitive, but why there are surpluses and where it's going and why Mayor Murphy underfunded these line items?
So the heavy motor equipment operator has, as we stated, a pretty substantial overage due to vacancies. This line is the highway department. Parking control officer, we had one of the positions filled for majority of the past 5 months. The other just filled about a month ago. So that has a substantial overage as well. And park maintenance man, same thing. We've got vacancies in that department as well. So from what Mike had put on here, the funds are required to cover various previous transfers from repair and maintenance budgets that were made to create a budget for the Children's Museum temporary roof repair, which totaled about $20,000, and budgetary overruns at the Pelsier Building, Senior Center, Police Department, and Fire Station Number 3. And then the larger part of this transfer, the refuse other services, will be used to fully fund the Hampden County Sheriff's Department contract, which was just recently signed by the mayor's office.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Councilor Bartley.
Yeah, through the chair. Can you just go over that again, Amy? The refuse other services, 65,000. What is that, please, in more detail?
So we have a contract every year with the Hampden County Sheriff's Department, and that's for miscellaneous landscaping and cleanup throughout the city. It is independent of ROCA. It's a separate contract. And that was recently signed by the mayor's office and submitted back to the Sheriff's Department. So that's the $65,000. That's the majority of this transfer.
Just a point where Mr.
Councilor Bartley.
Chair, did you know, were you aware of this, Mr. Chairman?
No.
Okay. Through the chair to the former acting mayor, to the acting mayor, former acting. Terry, can you elaborate on this contract with the, I mean, look, we see the Hampden County Sheriffs all over the place.
Yep.
Can you just, are you familiar with this? And can you sort of give me some more details about what we're-
Other than knowing that they contract out and they work with us to do a variety of things around the city, that's really all that I know about it. And then I was also somewhat under that ROCA was part of this, but obviously not.
So ROCA's not part of this?
I originally thought they were part of it, and that, but from what I'm hearing from Amy, that's not true, so.
I'll make a motion to suspend and allow the mayor to address us on this, because I don't understand this.
Motion made second to allow Mayor Garcia to address us on any knowledge he can pass on for the issue of the contract with the sheriff
Or any other topics,
or ROCA.
or ROCA.
Welcome, Josh.
Actually, I think, thank you for having me. Now that I'm hearing this and you have I think I'm just equally as frustrated as you are, Mr. Bartley. This contract came in front of my desk, I want to say, the week that I started. And so I had asked over and over if whether or not, I'm not a fan of just signing service agreements or contracts that are not on city approved contract form. And so it got to the point where it was, I was in the impression that these were funds that were already in our possession. Hannum County wanted to get rolling. And so we signed off on a contract. But for this very reason, I should have just went with my gut feeling. If this is the case, I would suggest not transfer anything. I was under the impression that this was already something that was budgeted for, in our control, that we can proceed forward with. But if that's not the case, I am not a fan of just transferring monies around in the middle of the fiscal year to fund services that wasn't earlier on budgeted for unless it's absolutely necessary. And with an actual plan in front of you that supports and answers any questions that come about, like the question that you have now. So I'm equally confused and frustrated.
Mr. Chairman? Thank you.
Councilor Riley.
Okay, so, just through the chair to you, so that's how we, it's formalities. I'm talking to you, but I always say to the chair.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay. Okay, so, I mean, I guess, Mayor, I guess we could belabor this back and forth, but the way I see it, there's sounds like there's some necessary things that have to be funded. All the various ones for City Hall and the Annex and the Senior Center and the Police Department and Station 3, as we know, hopefully that station's getting a little bit better with the roof repairs and some of the monies that we're getting from the rental now that we're collecting them, right, gentlemen? Now that we're finally collecting our rental money, that only took a
little while.
Only took a few years, didn't it? Yeah, it's all right. But we kept banging on the door. We got our rental money. Oh, it's awful. But the way, and I'll stand corrected if the chair wants to correct me, the way we in this body cannot carve out a financial line item like we can when we're doing the budgeting. So we have to, this is all for one and one for all. So unless the chair wants to say, because the chair kind of guides us on this stuff, but unless the chair says different, then it would be my opinion that we would give this leave to withdraw, but only for the purposes of trying to get our act together on this.
Is that the $60,000? That's the $60,000.
Well, right, but it's within $107,005. It's one whole transfer. So I'm the way I understand it. Now I'm no expert, but
yeah, it totals $65,000.
I don't believe that we can pull this out and then let the other stuff go through because the mayor signed off on this. So I guess we need. I guess I would need some. If you're not clear on it, and if we have some questions, I would say. I mean, this is just me talking, but if you can get them answered for tomorrow, you can send us a late file.
That's fine.
And we can get this right back into finance because we're going to have probably one more finance. That's what it sounds like before the next meeting is what it sounds like.
I'm so happy I walked in.
Where to?
Perfect timing.
Everything happens for a reason, and this is exactly why. I'm telling you, Councilor Bartley, that thing was sitting on my desk, and I should have went with my gut feeling and further explored it. I know there was a timing situation and thought that things might have been in place, but there's this weird practice going on in the city of Holyoke with these transfers every single day. We got to get control of that. I know this year I'm just walking into this. It's been a culture for a while. Hopefully we can set up some new practices. But
well, stick around and wait till we get to agenda item. The next agenda item. That'll be exciting too. So, but that's just my take.
Before we go on, Amy first. Amy, how long has the DPW, if you know, been using the sheriff's department to supplement labor?
I know that they've been contracted the years that I've been within the department, so at least the past 4 years. I can find out how much, how many years prior to that.
And the unions have been okay with this?
To the best of my knowledge, yes.
And Tanya, City Auditor, Tanya, you're still with us, right?
Yes.
Can you work with the mayor about separating out the repair and maintenance request transfers and, separating the refuse other services, the 65,000 into its own request?
Sure, I can file those as late files tomorrow if you like.
Okay, thank you. And Amy, how much time for repairs and maintenance? Is there any time constraints in terms of any of these line items where they need money in their budget immediately?
We do have two lines that are currently in the red, the Pelletier Building and the Senior Center. So I mean, Jim Kraus right now is on vacation until the 20th. I don't know what work he has in the pipeline on these buildings. The other ones are in okay shape right now. Minimal money, but it'll get us through, I would say, at least the next 14 days until he returns.
Okay. Mass General Law is very simple. There is no such thing as in the red. If you don't have it, you can't spend it.
That's right.
So
Right.
please talk
Well,
to.
I believe in what I was looking at in Munis, I apologize that it was a transfer just hasn't been put through yet.
Amy, I'm just, never mind. It's okay. You're doing a great job, and I thank you. You've been very helpful this evening. I'm very concerned about this Sheriff's Department contract. I'd like to get a copy of the contract because I had no clue that we were paying for these services. I mean, the trial court offers this almost same type of service through community service workers for free. And I was always told by the former superintendent that the Sheriff's Department, had better supervision and they performed the same services. I never once knew they were coming under professional service contracts, which is the mayor's prerogative, but of course a budget line item. So I'd like to learn some more about this. Councilor Bartley.
Yeah, just a suggestion, Mr. Chairman, but I'm not going to make a motion on this at all. But if what I'm hearing from the acting superintendent is that there are two of these relatively smaller transfers that possibly we could suspend our rules tomorrow and even take them as a late file and just approve those little ones. If the auditor would be so gracious as to send us, 5 or 6 different financial transfers, and then email to you which ones are the little ones. Maybe we could just deal with that tomorrow, and then take the rest of the transfers as a package along with this other bigger one and return these back to finance so that we could have a little more frank discussion. Furthermore, if the auditor and or the acting superintendent can, as a late file, send us whatever communications they have to support this arrangement with the Hampden County Sheriff's Department, that can all go to finance along with these financial transfers. So it's just a suggestion for you to work out with the auditor and the mayor, of course, and the acting superintendent. So it's just for you, Joe.
That's fine. I think it's logical, and I think it's something. I think we already have 2 people that are listening to the request that comes from all of us, but our administrative assistant and Tanya working with the mayor, I think this can be done. Tanya, I don't want to put words in your mouth. Is that all right?
That'll be fine.
Okay. And Jeff, if you can work with the mayor's office or with Amy to get us a copy of the contract so we can better understand it in the future.
And point of order, Mr. Chair, Jeff is communicating through me through a text message with a green light to these things. Okay. I'm not sure if that's violative of open meeting law, but I'm saying it to you.
No, he's right here.
He is, yeah, there he is, yeah, that's him.
There's no violation there.
So unless there's anything else, I'll make a motion to give this leave to withdraw.
And motion is to give this, we actually have to shoot it down because that's because of Mass General Law. It's the way we've been told in the past. So it's just that we deny the request, knowing there's going to be supplemental requests coming in at the same meeting.
Motion to deny this request.
On that motion, all those in favor? Any opposed? So moved.
Motion to take number 9 off the table.
Second.
Motion made second to remove item number 9 from the table. That the filed by Councilor Bartley, received by the full City Council and placed in finance, that the auditor report to the City Council on collection efforts for police outside work detail. refer this to the finance and a copy to the auditor. On a motion to take off the table for discussion, all those in favor? Any opposed? We have us with us this evening, of course, the auditor, Lieutenant Hart. John, you're still with us? And I know, John,
Yes.
you are the go-to person in the police department when it comes to a number of things. Are you representing Chief Pratt tonight?
I am, thank you for having me. He couldn't make it. He's hosting the senior citizen Christmas party.
He actually called me and he apologized, but you're certainly have been with us in the past, and I think everybody's comfortable if you can just update us on the what the efforts are for police work detail. I think Councilor Bartley may want to start with some questions to.
No, I'd rather just have the update.
Okay.
I have a follow-up question in a minute, though.
And Lieutenant Hart, if we can get an update.
Okay, sure. I know this has been a topic that we've been discussing for several years now. Right now, an update is we had changed vendors from the previous DTS system to the new roll call system that's in place now. And there are some certain reasons to do that. One being it was more beneficial to us in splitting it up between the new specials, our full-time officers, as well as the auxiliary staff that will be conducting outside details. And the other issue was that it came at no cost out of our budget. As you know, we had the DTS system, which was charging, I believe, I want to say roughly around 13,000 or so, give or take how many officers we had on the system per year. And I know we had instituted a 10% fee that went to the city. And I know it was our hope and our understanding from the previous administration that these 10% fees would help pay for the system as well as reduce the outstanding debt that's in the off-duty account. However, we've come to find out from Tanya that that money, because it was a fee by state law, it had to go into the general fund. So it was put into the general fund, and that's where we're at now. And I think the last I looked in Munis, without any deposits, it was at roughly 155,000 in debt. However, to date from the DTS system, since its inception in FY19, we've submitted roughly $194,804 to the city or the general fund. And with the new roll call system, we have 13,000 from July 1st to present that was deposited into that 10% or that fee account that was established by Tanya, I believe. So again, like I mentioned before, I don't know if we have to put in a request to have future fee amounts that are deposited into the general fund to be utilized to offset the off-duty debt. And I'm not sure if any of the funds from the ARPA that the city received were able to use to offset this deficit as well. And that's the summary.
John, let me just ask you a simple question before Tanya tells us how we're going to reconcile this debt.
Okay.
Currently, is the deficit growing, or have we also been able to pay, not use the general budget to pay outside work details?
Yeah, we do not use the general budget to pay outside details.
So the $150,000 is in the red is from years past.
Correct. And we've been slowly helping offset that, but it's kind of like a constant number, and that's from years past where we cannot recover those funds. It's from the vendors who have no longer are working, and ones that we can't get in contact with. And that brings up the other point of whose responsibility is it to go after those funds, and if those funds aren't paid, how do those vendors continue to work in the city? We've had this discussion several times. So I think we were starting with Mayor Murphy. We were starting to, and Tanya and Laurie, we all got together and we were starting a process to try and identify those vendors who were late. And Laurie was keeping an eye on those as far as awarding new contracts to those who were in arrears.
Thank you, John.
I still think we need some work as far as establishing some type of policy or procedures that we need to follow up on.
Tanya, before I turn this over to Councilor Bartley, can you just fill in some blanks as to where we are now and where we are going in terms of this, both the deficit and how we can prevent this from happening current and in the future? Tanya is our city auditor, Tanya Wojcik.
So what I want to say is about the deficit. In fiscal year 2020, we had a $243,000 deficit, but in the end of fiscal year 2021, it's down to $155,483. So it actually is decreasing. One of the things that we do need to do is we need for the police department to let us know which bills are uncollectible. So there's bills that we haven't collected from a year ago, but there's also bills that we haven't collected from 10 years ago. Those invoices from 10 years ago, we're not collecting those. We need to write those off. Those are the ones that we should either be writing off on the tax recap, or we should cover with our general fund expenses. Through a transfer, we can budget for it. But that's the only way that we're going to decrease this deficit. So what we first need to do is we need to figure out which ones are really not collectible at all. There's companies that they're not even longer with the city. They're no longer in business at all. So the police department is going to have to tell me how much that dollar figure is and give me the invoices that go with it so I have documentation. So I can say to the mayor, how do you want to cover this deficit? So this $155,000 at the end of fiscal year 2021, some of that is collectible. I don't know how much, and without that information, I'm not going to be able to rectify the situation.
And the money going...
Payroll? Go ahead.
I might be... If you want to finish, go ahead. My question is just about the 10% fee. And if it goes into the general fund, I thought we were going to establish a revolving fund.
So all fees per Mass General Law must go into the general fund. You cannot put a fee charged to constituents in a revolving fund or in this off-duty agency fund. It specifically says, and I did reach out to the state, John Hart is aware of this because I put him on the email, asking how we could get these revenues to offset this deficit. And what they said is all fees go into the general fund, point blank. So unless we want to take an estimate of the revenue from the year before and put it into an expense line that can then be transferred to this off-duty account. That would be the only way that we could use those revenues to offset this deficit, is to put the expense in our general fund budget.
What's the difference between a 10% fee and a vendor paying for the services of a police officer to do the work that they're doing, and that doesn't go into the general fund, it pays the police officer, right?
Correct.
So
Right,
what-
but because it's an additional fee, it clearly states in, like Tanya said, in the state law that all fees, regardless of what type of fees, that are above and beyond payment, have to be put into the general fund.
I'm not a big fan of revolving funds, I think everyone knows that, but this 10%, well, I'll stop there. You answered my questions. Counselor Bartley?
Yeah, just for the public and for anybody else's, the attendees here, we are not the U.S. Senate, and this is not an inquisition. Thank God. Okay, so we're gonna put that down as a premise, and we're all just trying to do our best. We'll put that down as a premise as well. But for the public that's paying attention to this is not the first time we've had this before us. This has been not only the first time before, not the first time for us, but this has been multiple year after year dings in the city's audit report, including the most recent audit report, which is another ding in the audit report about off-duty detail work for the police department not being covered by vendors and being picked up by the city taxpayer. That's how we got into this. And if we all remember the last few fiscal years under not the previous mayor, but the previous full-time mayor, and I use that in air quotes as I always do with that former gentleman, that we had budget crisis after budget crisis after budget crisis 3 years in a row because we had these huge debts that were impacting our free cash position, among other things. So that's how we got in this position. So, which leads me to another thing, which I'm going to just through the chair to the auditor. I want to make sure I understand what you wrote to me just a few short days ago on December 2nd, 6:05 a.m. I might add. You're up bright and early. Hi, Counselor. I don't see any provisions for payment in advance for off-duty services, and we were going back and forth about is it roll call? What's the vendor's name? Okay.
Yeah, that's roll call.
Roll
Yep.
call. Okay. So Tanya, this whole time this is at least the fourth year I've been dealing with this exact same topic. I asked you if we could be paid from a vendor for detail work in advance. And your response to me, if I'm reading this right, is that no, we cannot. Am I reading that right, or am I reading that wrong?
So when I read your email, I thought you were looking for an advance payment from roll call. So I have to say I may have misread that email. And yes, we could definitely receive payment ahead of time, but the police department would have to work with whoever their current clients are or whoever is doing this off duty, and they'd have to set up a process for advance billing. So they're going to have to change their own process within the police department to be able to advance bill, collect the funding before the services are provided. But roll call itself, when I read that agreement, there was no provision for an advance payment. So that's what I was referring to.
Okay, and I agree. I didn't see it in there myself. So this is through the chair to Lieutenant Hart. Lieutenant Hart, first of all, I thought we had changed our policies and procedures to collect payment in advance so we don't run into this situation again and again and again. Clearly, we're still running into it again and again. So, Lieutenant, is that something that, well, first of all, what is your understanding of collecting advance payments for vendors that want detail officers? Do we have a policy? Go ahead.
Yeah, I would not be in favor of that. I know the chief has been in contact with roll call, and we're trying to work out some type of policy or contract with them so that they would take over the role of seeking out those funds from the vendors. So they would be taking on the burden of those funds not collected.
Well,
So we're in communication with them, so I would recommend not going that route yet with the advance payment, which could be a difficult issue in and of itself if you receive payment, and it's hard enough now for us to try and get guys to work out there, and if we receive payment and aren't able to fill, then that creates another role in us transferring that money back. And so I would suggest that holding off on any type of recommendations until we have more conversations with roll call to try and alleviate that the debt on the city moving forward, and having roll call be responsible for that.
okay, well, obviously I respect your opinion and your position, but I'm going to just counter that by saying that this is multiple fiscal years in a row that we've been dealing with it. So I would just respectfully request that your department work with the mayor and the auditor to determine a resolution to this as quickly as possible. My humble suggestion is, not just me, it's been many counselors in the past has said the same thing. For example, could roll call provide that service? In other words, the vendor pay roll call almost act as an escrow type of a service, hold on to the funds, either they're performed or they're not. So if they're performed, great, they pay you directly from the money's collected. If they're not, they return the money back to the vendor that paid in advance. So that would be, but the mayor's office and the auditor have to be directly involved, and I hope that happens sooner rather than later. And, Mr. Chairman, I don't want to take over this meeting, because I'm looking at the time here too, and it's getting a little close to kickoff. But at the same time, I would hope that we have not just an oral report on this one, Mr. Chair, that we have kind of a written report as to where we are in terms of. I wrote my notes down here, but I think we've got to get a regular report on police detail work, and almost like a monthly kind of report at this stage of the game, just to see where we are. Otherwise, it's going to be every once in a while a counselor files an order. When you think of it, I'm not thinking about this every day, but every quarter we should at least have a report from the auditor and the police department and the mayor's office as to where we are in terms of whittling this deficit down, and where are we in terms of collecting revenues, and where are we with these bad debtors. If there's bad debtors out there, why don't we have a law department? I would hope we're going after these guys. There's certainly plenty of tools in Mass General Law for us to go after delinquent vendors. So, I guess, Mr. Chairman, I guess I'm satisfied for right now, because everybody's trying their best, but I think we got to get a little more detail going forward.
I agree, but before we make a motion, Counselor Sullivan via Zoom has his hand up.
Yep. Thank you. To Counselor Bartley's point, we've been through this a couple of times before about the pay up front, but one of the other possibilities that still isn't happening is we've gone ahead and paid these vendors. Now, on the warrant, before they're paid, somebody's approving that the work was done. And if the work was done and we're issuing a check for the completed work and they have not paid for the services, it's a very simple thing just to deduct it from their payment. I don't understand why this continues to be an issue. We're giving them money when the job, part of the contract is them paying for the police service. So why are we going ahead and paying them money and then waiting to get paid back? That's it.
Thank you, Counselor Sullivan. Counselor Murphy?
Yeah, I'm kind of of the agreement that we should be getting paid up front, because I'm assuming our officers that do work the detail, whether we get paid by that vendor or not, do get paid. And that creates a deficit in our general fund, which obviously is not something we want to do. But I also, and this goes to the roll call thing, and Lieutenant, and I know the chief got something my last week in office talking about state Department of Transportation invoices for road work, and that the 10% fee could not be added to that. So I just want to make sure that, and I'm pretty sure I read it correctly. I know it went to the chief, so I just want to make sure that roll call is not charging 10% that would be illegally charged on Department of Transportation police details. Like I said, I think that came in probably the last week in October, or maybe the first week in November. So,
Well, I don't know why the state would object to a 10% fee is about administrative costs for the city. I know we're trying to do it for different reasons, but it's still something that you're allowed to.
not according to the state.
Not according to the state, because, the big bully state, likes to do things their way, but there's a lot of things the state mandate us to do without paying for it. We'll start with the Quinn bill and just work our way down.
What they sent indicated that it was against state law to do that on a state Department of Transportation contract, so.
State law works for the state. It doesn't always work for the municipalities, which make up the state.
I'm not arguing with you there, Councilman McGivern, but the reality is, if we are not allowed to do it, we better make sure we're not doing it, or we'll have another deficit.
And I just want to say that, like I said earlier, we are in preliminary talks.
Sorry.
Roll call, and the chief has been in conversation with Mayor Garcia.
Alarm.
And I know we have several different options on the table, and I'm sure once we go back to the table with the mayor and the auditor, we can find a solution to this problem moving forward, and to offset and erase that debt we have in off-duty. And I'm pretty confident that this is the year that we'll get it done.
Councilor Bartley.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, so just as I said to the prior DPWs acting, that at some point, we got to have faith in our top administrators, and obviously Lieutenant Hart's one of our top administrators. So I do have faith, but it's going to require a very active mayor working a full-time job, which I know we now have, and then we had that proven by Mayor Murphy for the last 8 months. When you have a full-time acting mayor doing the job, maybe you can effectuate a few things. Can't get everything done, but you can make some progress on some other things. So the way I look at it, Mr. Chairman, why don't we say this is complied with for now, and then, if we have to file other orders to get quarterly reports, we'll do it. But I would just hope we can just get the reports in on a standardized basis until we get this thing settled.
Joe.
Councilor Tomlin.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said, and I think it's something that we have to work together with our department heads, the mayor, the auditor, to try to get this resolved in time. And it's already whittled down a little bit, 80, 90,000 from last year, but it shouldn't be anything, actually. And I know Lieutenant Hart will work with this. And, my thing, and I know Tanya mentioned about the fee going into the general fund, and if we can find out actually how much goes in, say every month or every quarter, to take some of that off to try to bring down the, if 20,000 goes in for a quarter, take 20,000 and transfer that out to pay off, down to 155. But some of those, I think, as the auditor said, that if it's 10 years ago, if we have to write them off, I think they have to be written off. I don't know how you get a hold of these people. We can contact the law department to try to get a hold of some of these, this bad debt. But if it's something that's 10 years old, it's going to be difficult to try to get that paid off.
Mayor Garcia.
Yeah, and I think to that point, I wouldn't want to write anything off until we know for sure that we have a system in place that doesn't put us backwards. So number one, get back what we can, and also number two, once we have a strategy in play to fund to fund gap the deficit, that there is a clear system in place that doesn't put us backwards. But I think a lot of what we talked about and a lot of the points you raised, Councilor Bartley, has to do with systems, internal control systems, in which we have to work together to strengthen. Currently, we're working on an initiative to engage in monthly finance meetings between the different financial functions of our city government, and I want to include the chair of the finance committee. And I did speak with council president on this already, and he's also, and well, if it's him or going to be, coming January, that it'd be a good idea that the council president be involved as well. And what it's going to be, it's a monthly all hands on deck to understand what those objectives are we need to achieve between now and the next 3 years to catch up. And if it includes reorganizing internally and how we do business, how we collect these fees owed to the city because of detail, or even how we get our reimbursement and grants collected on time, how we a process of how we even engage in line item transfers. These are things that we're going to need to look at. The deficiencies were clearly identified in the FY20 report. The fact that we're only looking at an audit for FY20 is even, more frustrating. And we should be looking at FY21 by now. I think, if we can just re-engage and get folks to understand and have that consensus on how we proceed forward from here, so that we can not only catch up, because that's one component of this, but also restructure and reorganize so that as we proceed forward, we're not going backwards in all the hard work we've done to catch up. So that's the plan for right now. I think coming in to this role, even while I was campaigning, the writing was on a wall, these financial issues that are certainly impacting our ability to effectively keep up with everything else. So I couldn't agree with you more on these issues, and I'm certainly looking forward to see, starting in January, how can we engage this group, the stakeholder group, the local government functions here, to be sure that we're keeping up with our objectives and closing these gaps. Because I don't know how you guys operated all these years like this. It's not a way to govern at all.
Thank you, Mayor. The motion on the floor is going to be that this order is complied with. I think it goes without saying that we still, and Tanya, thank you, for sharing the numbers with us, that we're going in the right direction. But I agree with Councilor Bartley, Mayor Garcia, with everybody here. We still have some work to do. It looks like we have a lot of work to do, because the taxpayers should not be paying $1 for outside work. We certainly want our police officers doing this work because they're trained and they have the expertise to do it. But whether it's a private entity or a municipality, utility, or a state, department, the money should be fully paying for the services that the police department provides. So with that in mind, is there any further discussion? And Mayor, I don't know who the president's going to be. We don't know who the chairs are going to be. We don't. But I think from all of us, from the city council, thank you for that invitation, and I hope it works out, because I think that's fantastic to bring a counselor into that level. I think it'll work wonders over the years. Any other discussion? On the motion, the order's been complied with. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? One more.
Take 10 off the table, please.
Second.
Motion made second to remove item 10 off the table, introduced by Councilor Bartley, that the city council and the mayor and the law department review the J&J settlement agreement and vote to approve joining, as this will provide needed funds to fight the opioid crisis. According to the Attorney General's office, municipalities that join will receive direct annual payments to expend on municipal abatement strategies developed with input from the public, health experts, municipal leaders, and families affected by the crisis. Fiscal year final action must be, FYI, final action must be submitted to the AG by January 2nd, 2022, in order for Holyoke to receive the funds. Motion off the table for discussion. All those in favor? Any opposed? So moved. Councilor Bartley?
Yeah, so as we talked about briefly at the last city council meeting, and I went through the chair at that point to Acting Mayor Murphy, and I did have a brief discussion with Councilor Tallman about this. So this is something that we saw in MMA, and Acting Mayor Murphy said that, and I'll stand corrected in a minute, is that this was indeed forwarded to the Attorney General's office. So, I think many of us are aware, but it might just bear repeating that there was a massive settlement with J&J, with all these various states and all these Attorney Generals and all the rest of that, and trying to get these funds. And now it looks like there's there's gonna be a pool of, I don't know what it is, but it's a lot of money. And so it looks like about $500 million are gonna come to the Commonwealth of Mass, and that the state's gonna have to divide that up per the crisis. And I think we heard from the acting mayor that we're gonna receive over the next 18 years, so, somewhere around $40,000. I don't remember the number, but it was right in that window. Of course, as the chair knows, we're gonna have to have we're gonna have to have a financial order to set up an account for this, and under 44A, and then we're going to have to go from there. So I saw this. I was didn't surprise me that the acting mayor was on top of it, because the acting mayor showed up to work every day and spent 12 hours a day in City Hall doing his job. So I was the least bit surprised that he was aware. I just filed it because I saw it, and I had not heard anything about it until I read it in the MMA and Mass Municipal Association. So I would rather just stop right now, Mr. Chairman, and hear from certainly the acting mayor, and then just get the take from the current mayor as to what we see this being used for going forward.
Councilor Murphy.
Yeah, this was something that came, and a law department met with me and, brought this to my attention, and we went through it, and it's approximately, and I'm not going to get an exact number, but I think it was $45,000 a year for 18 consecutive years. As the estimated, and it's still being formulated, but the estimated return to the city. And it would be to target opioid abuse, to try to target homelessness and things along that lines. And I also know that, I was having discussions with both the Community Development Office and the Board of Health, looking at some options here. One of the things that came up for discussion was to have somebody specifically be working cooperatively with the police task force for opioid abuse, but also be an outreach directly to people that are homeless, the people that are that we know the task force is meeting with, to try to get a full understanding of what is it that we can do to create an environment that gets people out of, or gets them into treatment, or gets them out of the homeless situation, which then creates further potential for abuse. So, those were just some of the things that came up. Obviously, trying to find shelters and all that was also part of it. And as I understand it, all of those kind of things would be potentially eligible expenses with this money. But it's approximately $45,000, and like I said, I think I've heard from 42 to 48, and that's why I'm saying 45.
Thank you. Mayor Garcia?
Yeah, no, I think, so certainly we want to finalize what that's going to be. There has been talks about the amount of work involved when dealing with this particular issue, and listening to both Alicia as well as our Board of Health director, and also our Veterans Agent Director as well. If there was a specialized person and a system, some sort of portal created that person can work with, who can better coordinate and manage and facilitate strategic action steps to deal with this particular issue in our community, that'd be a worthwhile investment. It's still early phase discussions. I think it's worth further exploring, but certainly a great revenue source we can tap into to contribute toward whatever our consensus is as a community to effectively tackle this particular issue and improve the quality of life in the community around opioids and homelessness.
Thank you. Councilor Bartley?
Just sort of clear, through the chair to the acting mayor. So we did send this in, Terry, to the AG, and
I did sign it. I'm going to say it might have just been right around the election time, might have been a little bit before that, and I believe we processed it through, and you're going to have to draw a blank from my brain in terms of exactly who I handed it to, but I know it came through all that process, and I'm pretty sure it came through the law department eventually to work with the Attorney General. So, I certainly
Okay, so in order to receive the funds, we had to hit a deadline, and what
Yep.
what you just
Yep.
said is that we,
Yeah, I had to sign off on a certain, but we were well in advance of that, but.
we hit the, the deadline
It was
isn't
like,
come yet.
why
so-
would we wait? I mean, do you want to wait, nothing personal against the mayor, but do you want to wait for the new mayor? I said, well, why would I wait? Since obviously this is something we want to get a chance to have, and in order to do it, we got to sign off. So, when it was right there, I just signed it off. And again, I'm pretty sure it went through the law department, but I'm not absolutely certain on that.
Okay, so I guess the only thing that we want to do now is at some point, we should get probably some kind of a communication from the law. I would rather just have it in writing from the
Yep.
law department
Yep.
that has been submitted, preferably a copy of what was submitted.
Yep.
And then I certainly would want to hear, I would certainly want to have the city auditor certainly in the loop on all this, because we're going to have to get a communication from the auditor. Clearly, the mayor's aware of it right now. So, I mean, that's going to be, the way I look at it, that's going to be the purview of the mayor.
Yep.
To tell us, but, we need to think it out. This is going to go on for 18 years. So there's going to be mayors that come and go over the course of that period, I suspect. And we should have a consistent plan in place. And the way to do that is to get a good foundation of what we want to see done. I mean, I know it's not a lot of money, but it's more than what we had.
Yep.
And we should use it to the extent we can, as wisely and as prudently as possible, and hopefully come up with some kind of a projected outcome, whatever it is, with that little money, whatever the potential projected outcome would be, Mayor. Come up with something. I mean, you're not going to end homelessness with $45,000 a year. You're not going to end the opioid, but you're going to determine this is what we can do with this money for this period of time. Maybe chop it off into 3-year goals. 6 3-year goals going forward, but might not be a bad way to think about it, and you do what you can from that. But I'm glad you got it in, Terry. I knew you would. Like I said, I wasn't shocked that you knew about it. But I would prefer to get a formal communication from the law department, sending to us a copy, and just to prove to me that they submitted it in a timely fashion to the AG, so I don't have to worry about it. Thank you.
Speaking my language.
We have a
that?
couple of
Speaking
people that
my
want to
language.
talk, and I just want to recognize our auditor is now in person. Welcome, Tanya. If the committee would oblige me, Tanya, could we allow Tanya to speak?
Suspend the rules and let
All
allow
those
the
in
auditor
favor?
speak.
Any opposed? Tanya, we're talking about the Janssen settlement, known as the J&J settlement, with the monies coming in for opioid crisis purposes. I think Mayor Murphy and Mayor Garcia have answered our questions. We're about to talk to the law department. But in terms of receiving the monies, how do we appropriate them? Or is that something that we do down the road?
So if you want to receive a revenue and you want to appropriate it, you would have to, if it was in the middle of a fiscal year, you would have to receive the revenues and then add the appropriation. I almost believe that you would want to do it prior to the fiscal year beginning if you knew the revenues were coming in.
Okay.
That would
And
be
this-
the best way to do it.
This looks like the deadline being January. We're not at that point yet. But at some point, we would probably have to take another vote to appropriate the monies before the mayor and the city would be spending them accordingly. Is that,
We would have to get the documentation for the settlement agreement that says that, we will be receiving these revenues, and then we can put them into the budget, into the local revenues, and then you can appropriate that into an expense line if you wish.
and we will always receive revenues, right?
Let's hope so.
Only if you tell us we can.
Well, okay, I'll stop there. Thank you. Any other questions for the auditor at this time? We have Counselor Sullivan, and then we do have Attorney Bissonnette with us. So, Counselor Sullivan, if you want to weigh in, then we'll go to the law department.
I'm all set, Joe.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mike. Attorney Bissonnette, welcome. I know you've been here for this discussion. Did you want to weigh in on anything you can add to this?
Evening, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for the opportunity. I just want to confirm we will get it in writing to the council before the meeting tomorrow night that there was a submission to the Attorney General's office for the original settlement. Negotiations are ongoing. We will not see final settlement documents probably till March. I will tell you that this only involves 2 distributors, and certainly Janssen as a manufacturer. It does not involve any of the other companies. So the possibility exists, A, that there will be other settlements to add to the pot of money coming for this particular purpose. And 2, there may be a redistribution formula on some of these monies. We've already objected because Holyoke was ranked behind several other communities that would not seem to have been in the same queue for funds as the city of Holyoke. So we want to have those numbers looked at again of opioid issues and opioid tragedies to make sure that Holyoke's going to get its fair share. Right now, that number stands at $800,000 over 18 years. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Attorney Bissonnette. Just one quick question from myself. Does the city council have to take
Sure.
any formal vote to endorse what the city has already signed off on, except for the, down the road, the appropriation vote?
My understanding, and again, early stages, right now they're assessing how many communities are in, but frankly, I can't see anyone turning down this money. I believe it's going to come in the form of a grant. The grant will then be presented to the city council for its acceptance. That will likely be the initial stage, and then it may be possible to build it into a budget once we know the total scope, consistent with what Mayor Garcia was just discussing. There may be 40,000, there may be more, and it may be used on its own, or it may be used to supplement other programs involving homelessness, housing, or opioid addiction. So still a lot of questions. This should be considered the floor and not the ceiling right now, but it's a great first step for Holyoke and a great move forward to get these cases settled. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I want to just put it in my words. The Mayor Murphy, when Terry Murphy was our mayor, got us into the pot. We don't have to endorse that, and when the grant comes in, and I think I'm glad you said grant, the appropriations will come before us, and we'll have to adopt that so Mayor Garcia can spend all this good money. Together. Yeah. Well said.
Well said, yeah.
Thank you. Councilor Tallman.
I'm all set. Make a motion that
Councilor Bartley?
comply with.
Motion made and second. At this point, this order has been complied with. A very fine order by Councilor Bartley. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Now, I know there's a game time coming up, and the chairman, who is a fan of the Big Blue, will make a motion to adjourn so any of those other fans can get out of here.
I'll second that.
On the motion to adjourn, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved.
Thanks. Good night, everybody. Go
Thank you,
Cats.
everybody.